No, you're right.
So, as I mentioned earlier, Mrs. Natasa Pilidou has been with the show 2 times before, obviously in the live studio. So now it's the first time on the virtual series. She is, of course, the Cyprus Shipping Deputy Minister. And going straight into the interview, as I know you've got quite a few commitments, COVID-19 has also put the world on pause, in addition to taking it virtually. What has this meant for the shipping industry?
Well, actually, shipping is, I think it is the single one of very few industries that has always been inherently international. So it's always been a case of having to conduct international trade, to communicate between countries. And so, so despite, I think, the huge impact of digitalization, shipping is also very much a physical activity. So, however much we embrace technology, we always need to take things from A to B, and that involves a ship which needs to transfer things. So, so because of that, the impact has been huge, as we can all see, because of the various impediments and obstacles that we have to transporting those goods from A to B in a way that is safe, in a way that is environmentally conscious, meeting all of our objectives that we've been setting ourselves for all these years. So the restrictions in movement have obviously impacted a lot, both the normal operation of the industry and also financially the companies that are operating within shipping. However, because of the global nature of shipping, at least, as we were saying earlier, technology has been very helpful in making sure that we can do a lot of things, we can continue to do a lot of things at the same pace and with the same level of efficiency. So I think that the worst thing about this crisis is that because shipping is international, wherever it might be, the outbreak might be, it's still affecting shipping. So shipping was one of the first industries to become affected, and it will probably be one of the last that will be able to start operating normally. As long as there's parts of the world that are struggling, those will impose a problem basically on our activities. But I think we've also done a lot to adapt to these situations. So yes, the world is largely on hold, but we have been doing a lot, both I think in terms of government level, but also company level, to make sure that we are able to operate. Because shipping's a necessity, and providing people with essential goods is something that cannot stop. So we cannot stop, and that's, I suppose, a blessing in disguise in this whole thing.
Actually, that is one of the points that has been recurring in the panels and discussions that we've been having, that I think through this unfortunate situation, it has also been highlighted how vital the industry is to the world going round.
That's why I think it will survive. It has to survive in whatever different format. It will still be there after all this has passed.
Another major issue that is being discussed is that the IMO, of course, as the regulatory body of the industry, has been also forced to put meetings on hold, important meetings like the upcoming MEPC that we have been discussing the greenhouse emissions, obviously, which is one of the most, which was pre-COVID, one of the most important topics going forward. And numerous other meetings, of course. Do you believe that in the long term, and after we have come through this COVID situation, this will have an impact in setting back the environmental actions of the industry?
That's a very difficult thing to predict. Definitely, I think it's very important that the IMO has set up a framework within the 32nd extraordinary session of the council, where we're already discussing and will be discussing in the next 2 months what needs to be prioritized and how it will be prioritized. Certainly our position as Cyprus is that MEPC, NSE, as well as the intersessional working group on greenhouse gases should be prioritized, because because if anything, the pandemic has shown us that it's so important to prevent all this damage that is happening to the environment. So we will definitely be supporting the position that we need to make sure that any postponement does not set back the timings of the objectives set. Of course, it's difficult to predict because we don't know how long the pandemic is going to last. We don't know whether a second wave would be, large, significant, affecting travel, affecting the possibility to hold physical meetings, and all of those things will impact. But also, I think it's a chance for the IMO to modernize, and I think it's great that the Secretariat and all countries are trying to find ways to modernize and to hold these discussions in remote environments as well, and that's definitely something that will need to be considered as part of the IMO's contingency planning, not just as part of the pandemic situation as well.
And that actually might turn out to be quite beneficial going forward, because it can expedite probably procedures and meetings rather than delay them.
Absolutely, and hopefully we can all become more efficient because of what's happening and retain some of the good things that we've learned throughout this process.
Yeah. So coming on to the next question, obviously you were lucky enough to be on the head and on the forefront of a member state in shipping, such as Cyprus, during these difficult times. And you can assess the impact, I guess, from both the local cluster and international cluster, and have a more general perspective. How would you assess the situation currently and in going forward?
I think, as I was saying earlier, this is very much a global crisis, and it affects the global industry. So I don't think, contrary to other crises that we've seen before, I don't think that you can very easily differentiate between the effect on the local cluster and the effect on the international community. Everyone has been affected negatively, and everyone will be affected negatively, and there's no question about it. So can we as governments, and can we collectively implement those measures that will help the industry to recover? I think, yes, there are a lot of things that we can do. But regardless of that, I think there will be consequences. I think there will be companies that are facing issues of liquidity, that are facing operational issues. And I think survival is the key concept, the key word, the key thing that we need to achieve. So as long as we can survive this difficult period and come out of it, then there will be a recovery. But the crucial thing is to provide the support to companies that they need so that they can actually emerge from this and be able to continue their operations. And of course, inevitably in such situations, some companies are in a better position than others, and as the government, we need to do everything we can to provide support to those that need it and that have the ability to survive if they are provided with the right types and levels of support.
And the Cyprus government announced, as soon as this pandemic started showing how it would be evolving, or there were the first signs of what would be happening, it announced some measures to support the companies, support employees, support the economy in general. As a shipping deputy ministry, what were the first things that you thought were necessary to do and implement?
Well, look, I mean, there's the operational side, and there's obviously the financial side. So I'll start with the operational measures. And obviously the first thing that we needed to think about was how to continue operating and providing services to our clients. And we were fortunate enough that that was done very, very easily. So we were able to all work from home, use our systems effectively, basically carry out all of our operations online. And I don't think that we missed a single deadline, or that we had any problems whatsoever in actually providing guidance and services, 24/7 service to all of our clients, same way as we did before. And because Cyprus has now sort of controlled the number of cases, at least at the moment we have single-digit cases every day, we've all been able to return to work as normal. So I think that's something that we've managed fairly well. Now, beyond that, obviously, there are special types of support that companies need in these difficult times. So first of all, crew is a huge issue. I think one of the major developments and accomplishments was that we were able to, as soon as we recognized, immediately, of course, we recognized seafarers as essential transport personnel. And because of that, we were able to implement crew changes, provisions for crew changes, which we believe offer a certain degree of flexibility given the difficulty that there is in the whole international framework of actually doing business. So we allow crew changes for every type of vessel pretty much, so commercial, pleasure craft, cruise ships, etc., under certain conditions which I think are fairly manageable. And beyond that, we offer a lot of support to seafarers in terms of the extensions of certificates where obviously a crew change isn't possible. So we've extended the validity of certificates like certificates of competency, of proficiency, medical fitness certificates, etc., until the 1st of September. And obviously, we will see what happens after that. As regards surveys and audits and inspections, again, there is a certain degree of flexibility and extension is possible. And we also allow remote audits where the class society can provide those services and agrees to provide those services. But the most important thing, I guess, is that we are available on a 24/7 basis. So there are problems that we may not have considered or, tackled on a blanket basis, and we are available at all times to discuss them and to provide our support on an ad hoc basis. And of course, we have several such cases, and we hope that we have been of assistance to everyone that's sought our input, and we urge everyone with issues to discuss them with us so that we can find solutions. From a financial perspective, we have extended the deadline for the payment of tonnage tax and of the Cyprus registry maintenance fee, the annual fee. And we have also introduced a number of measures on a let's say cross-sectoral basis, as you mentioned, to help companies. So we are considering the reduction or deferral of various other types of taxation. There's already we've already done the deferral of bank loan interest payments for a period of 9 months. And the Ministry of Labour covers the majority, the largest part of basically payroll costs for companies that have suffered, that have been adversely impacted by the pandemic. Another two measures that are coming in, which are important for our industry. First one is the provision of government guarantees for obtaining additional bank credit. That's been discussed in Parliament today, so hopefully that will be approved very soon. And also, again, the provision of government guarantees for the issue of vouchers, which is something that is being considered for the tourist industry, but also for the transport industry, for cruise operators, for passenger vessels, etc. So hopefully we will see both those measures coming in very soon.
That's quite a few measures, and it's very positive to hear that you've taken so many actions in this respect. You mentioned a few things that actually, even though the today's show is really devoted on COVID and the impact, the Cyprus tonnage tax was recently reapproved, so maybe you might want to make a reference to that.
Actually, that was something that was done. We got the approval from the EU late last year, and we have fortunately obtained our Parliament's approval as well in the midst of the pandemic. It was one of the issues that was prioritized, so very thankful to the House of Representatives for prioritizing the matter. So we are now completely done with the process of renewing the system and operating it. One of the things that still needs to be announced is that we will be providing specific discounts to the tonnage tax for environmentally friendly vessels. So that is something that we're working on to work out the provisions, the exact conditions under which that will be available. But other than that, pretty much everything else is as business as usual. So no major changes for companies that are already operating under the system. But some positive change with a wider list of eligible vessels, a better treatment of ancillary activities that are that fall within the tonnage tax system. So hopefully all developments are good and will be dealt with without any problem going forward. And so far we've had very good exchanges with all of the people operating within the system, the companies operating in the system, and hopefully that will continue.
Yeah, I think that is quite a positive note for the Cyprus shipping industry.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe we should add it to this conversation. Another thing you also mentioned is the flexibility and allowance of virtual surveys and audits by class, which we are seeing more and more often now that they're setting up centers to be able to accommodate this. Do you think that will be the new norm going forward?
Well, actually, completely coincidentally, we had implemented, we are in collaboration with a company in Cyprus called Prevention at Sea. We had designed a system for remote port state control, which has now been completed, and we are just working out the final touches to start implementing it in a pilot form. So this was before the pandemic outbreak, but obviously it proved very topical because yes, I think there's a lot that can be done remotely. It improves the efficiency of inspections of surveys, because when you do a survey and you're wasting a lot of time on a lot of the admin, that's a loss for both parties of precious time and input. So if you can actually limit the physical surveying work to what is needed to be done on board the vessel, then that's definitely a good thing. And the other benefit that we've seen at least through our system is that there's a lot better flow of information, sharing of information, finding audit trails, and actually reducing the duplication of work from one audit to the next when there's a good solid system that is being used. So yeah, I definitely think that will be something, a change that's here to stay.
Yeah, I think we would generally be seeing more automation, and especially during this pandemic. Another concern that some of my friends that are at sea were expressing, that during these audits in some states, you have to have people physically come on board, which that then increases the risk of the virus spreading. So
absolutely, yeah. Which is why we have to accept also the delay, basically, of a lot of inspections in certain cases as well in the last couple of months.
And the other thing you mentioned is that obviously you're available 24/7 as a ministry to attend to companies' concerns and requests during this pandemic. Within our local community, what were the greatest challenges or problems that were shared to you by companies?
I think the greatest challenge, and at the same time the greatest success, perhaps, aside obviously from the financial support, was the crew changes aspect, because it was very difficult to actually find the mechanisms that we could use which would make it practical. And on a practical level, another challenge that we are still facing is the limited availability of flights worldwide, which basically means a lot of admin work for us and for the companies involved in finding ways to get people out of the country and to get people in the country. And that's not just for crew changes, it's also for the repatriation of a lot of people who were working in the shipping industry, who found themselves, in different countries, and they needed either to come back to Cyprus or to go somewhere else. So connectivity is definitely a practical problem that we've been facing all over the world. And of course, as I mentioned, from a financial level, sort of planning and implementing the right measures, which will, on the one hand, obviously support the companies, but on the other hand, are sustainable for the state and will gear the economy, sort of push the economy back into a restart. That's also a big challenge, which the government has been facing over the last few months, and will still be facing, I think, for a while.
True. That actually brings me on to the next question that has to do with how governments and the respective bodies have been dealing. Has there been an alignment in dealing with this crisis? Obviously, recently we have seen the seafarer change coming to the forefront, and IMO, and IATA, and ICS, and all the organizations, joining forces. Do you believe there was enough alignment from the beginning?
Look, I mean, a lot has been said about the things that could have been done or should have been done better. And in these types of situations, I think there's always, it's always easy for people who are, especially when people are sitting at home, watching the news day in, day out, to sort of criticize what's going on. And I think the important thing to remember is how truly unprecedented this crisis was. It really wasn't something that people had planned for. And I think contingency plans are definitely very useful and very necessary for this reason. But no matter how much you plan, when something like this happens in real life, there will be difficulties, and there will be a lack of alignment in many different situations because different states operate differently. So, you can't have a single magic hand sort of like coordinate everything. I think organizations like the IMO and the ICS have done a great deal to help the industry, to encourage governments to think about really important issues and to bring such issues to the forefront, because people going about their daily business aren't necessarily going to think of poor seafarers stuck on a ship for months and months on end. So it was good that there was so much vocal sort of encouragement of people and governments to think about these issues. In terms of alignment, of course, there's a lot that we can do. I mean, technology, a major issue where a lot of our systems could be more aligned, a lot of our policies could be a lot more aligned. So I think those are things that we will need to consider. On a sort of level of dealing with the crisis outside of shipping, again, so many things could have been dealt with differently or done better. And I think some states are luckier than others in the timing in which different situations were dealt with. But I think generally, coming from a small country, I can say that it's reacting early and reacting in a very methodical way definitely has yielded results in our case. But I will say that it probably is a lot easier to do that when you have a population of 1 million as opposed to a population of however many billions. So yeah, it was an unprecedented situation. Some things were done well, some things less so perhaps, but we can't expect anything different in times of crisis.
You did make reference to aligning policy. Maybe is there anything in particular do you believe that we will need to be doing in policy going forward?
Well, I mentioned earlier the effective use of technology. Mm-hmm. I think both in Cyprus, at least, both the Shipping Deputy Ministry and the companies operating here all continued their business as usual, and we really proved to ourselves that we can actually use technology much more effectively than we thought perhaps we could, because we're never faced with a situation where we'd have to solely rely on it and nothing else. So one of the takeaway points, I think, is that we will need to introduce more agility and more speed into the policies that regulate technology and that make sure that technology is used in a way that is safe, in a way that doesn't, give rise to different threats, but also in a way that doesn't increase bureaucracy. I think one other important aspect is that a lot of us were able to do away with bureaucratic sort of procedures that weren't necessary, and I think it would be a mistake to bring them back. Instead, we would just need to think about how can we permanently get rid of, or simply just get rid of all of these things without without
like you're gonna
because we just really definitely need to be going in that direction. And there is a tendency, I think, through great work that organizations are doing, inevitably, when a lot of members, a lot of countries are involved, inevitably there is a lot of, back and forth and sort of elements that we could improve on. I think with environmental change, which we mentioned earlier, we can all see how better off the world would be with it, even, decreasing pollution a little bit. So I think now that we've all seen that in the most, I think in the most revealing way possible, it would really be a shame to go back on all the work that we've been doing. But I think that one of the issues that we have been raising all along as an industry is that companies need financial support in order to be able to implement the environmental objectives. And I think that is going to be very, very relevant going forward. And so at EU level, at IMO level, we need to think about how can we incentivize, all the stakeholders, and how can we give them the tools to be able to innovate, as opposed to making a whole set of rules and then trying to find ways where we can actually implement the rules. And I think if there's one more thing that I could mention is that the crisis has shown that flexibility in the workplace and working from home can be just as effective as working in the office. And I think I hope that this will help to change people's perceptions in terms of presenteeism, in terms of sort of the stereotype way in which we think about work, and that this flexible working conditions will ultimately help to introduce more diversity into the maritime industry. And I hope that this diversity will extend to young people, to motivating more young people to become involved in the industry, which will sort of be looking at things in a modern and progressive way. So hopefully that's also something that will come out of it.
That's a very interesting aspect, and I think that we could do a show separately on how to attract.
Yeah. Sure.
It's a very good starting point, to be honest, because I think the environment in which you work in and the flexibility that you have is definitely, I think, for the millennial and younger generations, of course, that they take into consideration. And as I know we have to kind of wrap up soon, you already mentioned technology and working from home as lessons learned. Anything else that you would add to that? And anything that has struck you particularly during this crisis?
No, I think if anything, what we've seen is that all the goals that we had set ourselves all along are actually pretty accurate. We need to embrace technology. We need to protect the environment. We need to encourage diversity. We need to motivate innovation and innovators to get involved in the industry. So it's proving in a way that we are moving in the right direction. If anything, it shows us that these are not just theoretical issues, that we really, really need to be pushing to make all of these things happen. And I hope that more people on a wider level will be able to understand the importance of these things now that this crisis has happened. And I really hope that despite the financial constraints and the difficulties that we will be facing in the next couple of years, that we will remain focused on these objectives. And I really hope that, because this thing that's happened to us is possibly the greatest change and the most rapid change that we've all had to deal with in our lifetimes, and because of that, I hope that we generally as people will become less resistant to change, which is something that's really, really important for us to be able to embrace the changes that we are talking about. And I really hope that this is something that we're not just going to forget next day once we're out of it and just go back to, business as usual, but actually be proactive in bringing about the change that we need. But what struck me, which is what you asked about, what struck me about the crisis, and it has nothing to do with shipping, but what saddens me about the crisis is that there was such a sudden surge in the incidents of violence against women, children, of people being stuck at home, which again shows how volatile these things are and how we haven't done enough globally, actually, because this is a global phenomenon. We haven't done enough to change perceptions and to change culture and education and the way that people grow up enough for us to be able to deal with these situations, these difficult situations, in a more collaborative manner and without violence. So I think, again, one of the things that the crisis shows is that we really need to be working on those issues and trying to provide people with tools to deal with difficult situations in a constructive way and not through violence and lashing out.
But it's a very valid point, and I'm glad you mentioned it, because we've been focusing on shipping, but obviously
it's not shipping related. It's just one of the things that has made an impression on me.
But obviously, it's one of the most important factors that we've seen in society over this the impact on society.
Yeah.
And indeed, we should be dealing in it from the root and not
hopefully.
Putting down the basis and going forward. So unless there's something else you would like to add from your...
I guess going back to shipping, one important achievement of the Cyprus flag recently is that we've made Call Ship 21. So that's something that we should mention, just to end on a positive note instead of... we're really glad that we have managed to sort of reduce our detention rates and make a lot of the improvements that we had planned and sort of hoped for in the past. And so hopefully we can continue despite the limitations that we've had in the way that we do things, especially with physical inspections, preparation surveys and stuff. We hope that we can retain those track records and continue to improve.
I think overall, even though during this unfortunate event, the Cyprus flag has shown a few positive notes, like the reduction in detentions and the tonnage tax passing through these times, and of course the way that it reacted to seafarer and crew changes. Being one of the first states, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that quickly adapted to trying to accommodate this request. So continue doing the great job that you are doing, and thank you for being with us today.
And likewise, I think the industry has done a great job throughout this crisis to continue under very difficult circumstances to operate, and it's not just the work of the shipping deputy ministry; it's collective effort of everyone in Cyprus, but also everyone everywhere in actually working towards what is the common good, and I hope that we can continue to work with that objective of just doing what's best for the industry and what's best for everyone, for people sort of benefiting from shipping as a service.
And I think one of the greatest achievements is that finally they can see this industry and the seafarers as key workers.
Yeah, exactly. So going back to the organizations, the various organizations, I think they've done a great job in voicing those concerns, bringing those issues to the forefront, and really demonstrating how visible shipping should be, as opposed to the usual sort of under the radar profile that it maintains.
And that is a huge step going forward. Anyway, in closing, I hope that we can take forward all the positive things that we have seen evolving over the time and ways of working and adapting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I hope that we can sort of discuss a more positive more positive aspects in our next interview once all of this is over and we can say that we implemented some of the stuff that we said it needs to be done.
Looking forward to it. I'm sure we will. We're a resilient industry.
Thank you very much.
And hope to be back soon. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Nice afternoon. Bye.
Bye.
That was it from It's All About Shipping with Gina Panayiotou. Stay tuned on Friday for our next Step 2020 panel as usual.